Thank you, Michelle. Bring the meeting to order. Let the record reflect that we are missing Mr. Hammer, Mr. Kimball, Mr. Ponson, and they may be in momentarily. We move now to the adoption of the agenda. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Ben. Ms. Ritz?
I second.
Thank you. Dr. Walker?
I would like to add a topic under new business,
Yes, sir.
sewer charges.
Sewer charges
Sewer
under new
charges.
business. Any other additions? Ms. Ben and Ms. Ritz, are you fine with that amendment?
Yes.
Thank you. Please vote. Sorry about that, Dr. Walker. I got the cart before the horse. Everybody's light yellow? There we go. And it passes 8-0. We move now to open forum. Do I have any pink slips? No? I did want to add, just at this time, that we have new guidelines for presentations due to any kind of security risk or what have you. If anyone in the future would like to give a presentation to the CAC board, and I'm assuming this means the regular board as well, they are to follow the guidelines and drop off a day before the presentation is to be given to the board in this little envelope to the front desk in the atrium. So let the record reflect that, and I think maybe I'll just pass that over to the chair to go over next week as well.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, sir.
drop off what?
If they have a presentation on a flash drive, they're just to drop it off the day before. And this is for reasons of security for the computers, I believe,
Okay.
so that we don't get any malware
All right,
or
thank you.
bugs presented to the ECUA. Mr. Perkins?
Yeah, just want to make sure that, so if they want to come up and speak or hand out, literature or anything like that,
Fine.
presentations, have an easel or whatever, it's just electronic.
Just electronic
Okay.
only, yeah. So maybe we could do a press release of that, staff. All right, thank you. With no open forum, we move to approval of the minutes from March 19th, 2019 on page 5. Do I have a motion? Okay, this one's not difficult. Thank you. Ms. Ritz?
Second.
Thank you. Please vote. And it passes 8-0. We move now to item F, hometown healthcare presentation from the Florida League of Cities. Mr. Sorrell?
Yes, ma'am. I have the HR department. Kim Scruggs is here, and she'll make this presentation, or start the presentation, and then it'll go from there. But I think Florida League of Cities wants to say a few words.
Thank you.
There we go. Okay. Thank you for having us. We have Erin Carper and Gwen Mirabar. Is that close enough? Okay. She's recently married, and so that's a tongue tire for me. Anyway, they're here to present us with a Hometown Health Award that we're proud to receive.
And Gwen, actually, you're still Gwen Knight in my cell phone Rolodex. So I'm getting there.
All good, all good.
I'm getting there. But Chair Campbell, members of the board, Mr. Sorrell, want to thank everybody for their time today. And and really, this is just a couple of short words to celebrate the continued success and continued commitment of ECUA and ECUA to the wellness and well-being programs. Had quite a shift here in our culture of ECUA in the 6 years that we've been together. Your employee engagement over that time period is exceptional. Your engagement in your on-site health coaching You got employees that are involved in on-site health coaching, telephonic health coaching, weight management program, challenges, things that were unfathomable 6 years ago. And, the level of engagement from your employees is awesome. There's also another layer of awareness from your employees. Your employees are, learning about the different changes and the different activities that they can be doing on a daily basis that are going to impact their lives personally and professionally. And, the level of awareness that they've got, than where they were 6 years ago is incredible. Also, a level of awareness of the different tools and resources that are available to them, that are available at their fingertips, provided by y'all, ECUA. It's amazing some of the programs and services that you do offer to your employees. A lot of these programs and services, this is made possible by you, the board. This is where it starts. This culture shift, this change in belief, this change in thinking starts with y'all at the board level. Mr. Sorrell, at your level, and our HR staff behind me on my shoulder over here, Kim Scruggs and her team, these guys are rock stars. We work with cities and municipalities statewide, and we do not have the level of support and the level of detail that they all, can manage on a daily basis. I swear they don't leave the end of the day until every employee question and every employee email is taken care of. It's amazing. It really, really is. And, y'all, everybody in this room ought to be really darn proud of what you do on the health and well-being front, because it's amazing to see where you were 6 years ago to where you are today. And we're also very proud of that. And we're also very proud to present ECUA with a 2017-18 Hometown Health Award on behalf of the Florida League of Cities. So, congratulations.
Thank you very much. You want to get? We're gonna let Kim come up and accept that award on behalf of the HR department. And I personally would like for Ms. Benson to go down and be there for this, because you thanked our board, but if I have heard her more than one occasion say, we need people using their HSA, we need people in these programs, I think she was very influential in that, and I would love for her to take credit.
Very good. And because it takes a team affair, can I get Stephanie and Hannah to come
Absolutely.
up with us as well?
Absolutely.
If I break my leg.
I know.
I've got good insurance, right?
You do.
It takes a village.
You want us to shift? Okay. Now everybody break their. No, I'm just kidding.
Very good. Looks good. Good picture.
Very nice. And Gwen, good luck with that, name change.
It's gonna be a struggle.
I'm still being called Haynes after almost 30 years, so. Thank you very much. We're very, very proud of our HR department. Dr. Walker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would like to second what you said about Chairman Benson. Excuse me. She has belabored these topics many a time and to useful effect, I'm sure. And so I just want to give her recognition for that. Also want to mention that before you today is not the board, but the Citizens Advisory Committee. And the committee members, appointed committee members, are often also the source of good ideas and some of the good things that we do, not just the board.
Yes, sir. Mr. Perkins.
Well, done with that. I had something else.
Oh, okay.
Unless there's anybody else that wants to.
You don't want to say something nice about me?
I mean, all of y'all, it's a great job. I even had to quit using smokeless tobacco when I filled out one of those little things that said, I don't use tobacco. So. But thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much.
But I noticed we kind of skipped over open forum, and there's some people here from River Gardens who.
No, we had open forum.
Oh, we did?
Yes, sir.
Okay. thought
But
we
I
just
would
skipped over.
love to have them,
Okay, we'll just do it when we get to the
Okay.
capital improvement budget.
Okay.
They have a project they want to speak in favor of.
okay. Well, they can come up now if they would like. If they
Y'all
don't
want
wanna
to come
stick
up,
around.
come up now? I hate for you to have to stick through what could be a long, but not a long meeting. Anybody?
I hope it's not long, but if you
Okay.
would love to come up and speak to us now, you are more than welcome to. Or you want to wait until that part and watch the whole board meeting, you can do that too.
Or you don't have to at all if you don't want to. I'll
That's
speak
true.
for you, but
There you
just
go.
know that you're here.
Thank you for coming, we appreciate it. We move now to item G, which is the Recycle Star Program on page 11. Do I have someone that wants to excitedly move this one?
I move the staff recommendation.
Thank you very much. Do I have someone that wants to second? Ms. Ritz?
Did you say second or?
Second?
I second, but I also have some questions.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Benson, you're first.
Thank you. I love this. I mean, I love any kind of positive reinforcement. One of the thoughts that I've had for a while, and maybe we could grow this into this, is to make it not just individuals, but neighborhoods. And you award a neighborhood recycling award, because that can generate some peer pressure and some community awareness and community pride. And, you could have the president of a homeowners association give it to the next one, and you could really engender some competition. I think it would be worth going to that next level as we implement this. But I'm very excited.
Absolutely. Ms. Ritz?
I'd like to piggyback on what Ms. Benson has said. I had thought about, is ECUA going to divide the community into grids? And so the grid would probably be fostered by your neighborhood idea. I also had a question, how often would this inspection take place, and is it while the can's being emptied, or is there going to be a person from ECUA going around and lifting the lid and looking? So that wasn't very clear, so I thought, okay, if I looked out and didn't see a logo on their shirt, I would wonder, are they dumping things in my recycling can? So those were thoughts that I had. How is this going to be carried out by ECUA?
Thank you, Ms. Ritz. Michelle Schneier.
Well, I have some questions also. I was wondering if we could get some examples of contamination, because apparently the community needs to be educated on what the contamination is so that they can prevent doing that. And who will appoint the selection committee? And will they select random containers? How will the containers be selected that are going to be inspected? And how will they go about deciding which cans to inspect? And what will they do exactly? Go around to neighborhoods, to unsuspecting houses, to go through the recycling can out by the road? If you could explain what the process is and examples of contamination.
Thank you. Before I go to any other speakers, is Mr. Rudd available to answer?
He's hiding back there. I can answer some of those
Oh,
questions
there he
if
is.
you want.
Sorry about that,
But
Randy.
he
You
can
wanna
come
come
up
up
if you'd
and-
like.
Answer some? We'll hear it from the horse's mouth.
All right. Yes, ma'am. Some of this is already taking place, the inspection of the cans. Jim Roberts is already going through neighborhoods that have been identified by supervisors and drivers that are high contamination areas. And what we do is when we find a can that is contaminated, some examples of contamination would be food waste, construction debris, yard waste. Those are the big items. Medical waste is another one that we find in the recycling cans. If we find someone that is putting contamination in the can, we tag the can. Jim makes contact if possible with the resident and explains what the problems are. On the flip side of that, if he finds someone who's doing it properly, he records that as well. makes comments to them. Those will be the people that are basically thrown in the hat. And that's how we're gonna do it. Draw them out of a hat at random to select who's gonna be selected each month. So, we have thought about going on a neighborhood basis, and the thought is, how do we do that? So we're working on that part as well.
Thank you. Mr. Ponson?
I'd like to see, I mean, this is a great idea, and it goes with all of the marketing stuff we're doing, but I'd like to see a sticker on the can as a, you know, kind of stays there as a recognition of somebody who won in the past.
Very good. Anything further? Well, Mr. Kimball?
So if we've got a neighborhood that everybody's doing a good job, nobody in that neighborhood has a chance of being selected, essentially, as it currently sits right now.
No, we'll expect all neighborhoods at random.
Okay, I thought, I was understanding that you're saying he only goes to the bad.
We're starting with the worst
Okay,
ones.
gotcha.
We'll
Okay.
hit everybody eventually.
Okay.
Okay, so, you know, when I first saw this, I thought the same thing that you thought, Randy. I thought, wouldn't it be cool if they had a sticker on their can that they were really good? But what would happen if they went from good to bad? Then we'd have to paint green over top of that sticker. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do like that, a sticker on the can. That was a really good idea. I'd like to see us get out in front of this with the media before we do it, so that everybody knows it's coming, and build it up, you know, kind of build it up with those neighborhoods.
Yeah, I think we've actually talked about that, and Jim and Natalie are gonna work on that.
Okay.
And rather than put a sticker on the can, what we talked about doing, it was like a yard sign they could put
Oh,
out
yeah.
there. Because
Okay.
the stickers on the can get torn up when they
Yeah.
get dumped, so something like that, so they would have some recognition as being the winner.
Well, positive reinforcement is always very good. Dr. Walker?
If they change their ways from good to bad, we could always just take the can away, give them an old, dirty old can with holes in it and no sticker.
Randy Ponson?
The other thought that came to mind was a special can that they kept for a month. I know you gotta deliver it and all that, but something that would be like a yard sign that said, you know, winner for the month or whatever, and star can. So, something like that, but I think would be a great way to add this.
All right, well, Ms. Benson?
Or we could say our driver will take your can back to your house for 1 month
Oh,
after.
man, that'd be sweet.
That would be a real reward.
Mr. Kimball?
Well, I like the idea of the yard sign, and because if that stays there, that other neighbors will see that as a constant encouragement, and maybe they'll ask them, you know, hey, how'd you get that? And it can be a conversation, you know, for other people, so.
A lot of good ideas. So I think in theory is what we're voting, and we'll leave it to staff to implement it. But we have a motion and a second. Please vote. And it passes 10-0, and thank you to staff for thinking about that. We move now to item H, used wheel loader purchase on page 14. Do I have a motion?
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Ms. Booker?
A second.
Thank you. Discussion? Michelle Schneier.
Is there any type of warranty on it? I have a couple questions.
Okay.
First off, is there warranty on it? Has it been thoroughly checked out by a mechanic? And has it ever been in an accident, or do we know of anything that is wrong with it, or any type of body damage, et cetera?
Thank you. I see Mr. Rudd up there to answer the questions.
Yes, ma'am. There's no warranty remaining on the unit. It has been inspected by a mechanic, is in good shape. In fact, they're putting a new set of tires on it which is pretty expensive. And as far as we know, it's never been in an accident.
Thank you. Ms. Ritz?
I had noticed when I was reading the supporting data, can you hear me? that they could possibly use it at the MRF. And I thought, well, how is it going to be transported between MRF and the CWR? I didn't know if it had to be trailered there or if it was drivable.
No, ma'am, we'd have to put it on a trailer, but we do that frequently with equipment.
Okay. And I had one or two other
Okay.
questions. Oh, that was answered. And I'm assuming that from what you said, the mechanics have inspected it, that
Yes, ma'am.
you have mechanics that can service it,
Yes, ma'am.
because they have had experience with the others. And I think that was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ritz. Good questions. Mr. Ponson?
What's the normal life expectancy of this type of equipment in the manner that we use these?
15 years.
15 years?
Any further questions? Ms. Ritz?
Is it, I'm sure if I fully understood the factory build codes, I'd not be able to answer the question, but is it diesel run or gas run?
Yes, ma'am, it's diesel.
Diesel, okay.
Ms. Schneier?
Does it currently have the amount of mileage and wear and tear that you would make it, that it would make you think that it would last the 15 years?
Yes,
Minus
yes.
the 5 years that it is?
Yes, ma'am, we expect off-road equipment to use hours versus mileage, but its hour range is consistent with what you'd expect from a 5-year-old piece of equipment.
Kind of like a boat motor, huh? Thank you. Great questions. If no further questions, please vote. And thank you, Mr. Rudd.
I'm kind of torn. If it's like a boat motor, I'm not sure I want it.
Not one that you've driven. And it passes 10-0. We move now to item I, which is Iron Rock Off-Site Force Main Access Agreement on page 18. Do I have a motion? Or does everybody understand? Would they like me to, let me let Mr. Sorrell explain item I on page 18.
Yes, ma'am. This is a subdivision, a private subdivision being built by a developer here in town, and it's been going on for quite a while. He is building this particular section. Well, I think this is close to 300 homes. He wants to build another section, which is north of there, and he wants to tie it together with a sewer pipe there. The problem is we can't get to that to maintain it if he doesn't build the other section. So essentially what that means is we are making him, or asking him, to provide us with a letter of credit so that if he doesn't build the other section, we will be able to build the road in order to maintain this section of pipe. He is convinced he's going to build it, and I think that's wonderful if he does. He won't have to pay this amount of money, and he will go ahead and construct the road and so on. He will actually feed the sewerage out to a force main out on, I think it's 297, but anyway, he's going to feed it down that way with a different route. But if he doesn't, we're going to have a means to maintain this particular sewer line, and he understands that. So this is just a compromise that we've been able to work out with him in order to be really a win-win for both sides. So we recommend it to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Ben. Dr. Walker?
I'm curious about the meandering route of this force main, proposed force main. Force mains don't depend on topography, so they can pretty much go in a straight line usually, but this one meanders all through this undeveloped area and even through 2 wetlands. It just seems, I don't know what to say, it just seems unusual to me.
Do you have someone that would like to speak to that?
That's not going to be a problem at all. I mean, this will be a force main. It won't be any issue whatsoever. So, I mean, we have pipes that do a lot worse than this in a lot worse areas than this. So this really isn't going to be a problem at all.
Thank you, Mr. Ponson.
I had a couple things that just come to mind. I mean, most of the stuff, a lot of times we see stuff and it's over, time, you see it again. This is something new that I haven't seen, so is this something that is done fairly regularly in this business?
By something that's done, you mean a letter of credit, or are you referring to the type of development?
I'm talking about the allowing them, the letter of credit to do it in the future. Is this kind of a real one-off?
It's somewhat of an unusual circumstance. We don't normally have developments built like this in sequence, and especially this far apart. But this is something that we can live with very definitely. The developer for a while pushed back a little bit and didn't want to provide this letter of credit because he simply didn't want to build this and then have to build a road too. But really, it's on him now. If he builds the second subdivision, he doesn't have to build the road, and he doesn't have to build this pipeline. He'll bring it down 97. So it's sort of a win-win. So it's something that we work out on an individual case. That's why every single development is different.
Thank you, Ms. Ritz.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I had one more quick question about, I don't see anything here about a timeline. He says he wants to do it in 5 years. I mean, is there some way to revive this after, say, 3, and if he's not moving, then maybe it needs to happen? If this thing falls off the table, how do we go about making him go ahead and do it, even though he says he's gonna finish?
But the agreement is there on page 22.
I believe the answer is after 5 years, if he hasn't built his other subdivision, we will call his letter of credit. We will build the road ourselves with the money that he's providing.
Thank you, Ms. Ritz.
Thank you. I was, several comments. I noticed the topography is not shown, but Mr. Sorrell said that was not pertinent to building the, I call it the snaky force main. My other thought, or at least another thought, was the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. Have they been contacted about the pipe going through the undeveloped wooded area?
Mr.
Because
Sorrell.
it crosses wetlands twice.
Yeah, I don't think that's an issue. It's really up to the ECUA more than it is FDP, because we're not going to contaminate anything. And the building of the sewer lines under the purview of the ECUA and our staff. So that's not going to be an issue, but we always communicate with DEP, so that's not going to really be a problem either. It's just that this particular area, if we have to maintain that pipe, we have to be able to get to it. That's the big thing. And we will with this particular proposal. So it's, I don't think it's a problem. It's going to remain private for a while, so if we ever have to maintain it, we'll build the road so that we can get in there.
Thank you. Ms. Ritz, is that your last question?
Oh, no,
Okay.
one more.
Thank you.
This is what happens when I read something at 11 o'clock at night. Who is holding this sum of money credit? In other words, is it a bank? Is it a holding company? Or, no?
Mr. Sorrell.
You know, I don't know exactly, but I think that our attorney will be holding the letter of credit, and he's the one that wrote most of this agreement, so I'm sure that that letter of credit will be somewhere either held by him or by some banking institution, but it'll be in a safe place.
Mr. Perkins.
Well, one thing I've learned from some of my friends who've served in the military is they will often say the map is not the terrain. And, you know, we get a nice little sheet here that's black and white, and, oh, the road's curved, but, you know, I'm sure that there's reasons for that. There may be heritage oaks. I mean, there's a couple of wetlands there and everything, and, you know, I'm sure that there are reasons for that, but the main thing is that when we do things like this, you know, we have to, and our rules and regulations have to be rational and reasonable. And a lot of times, you know, we have rules that are steadfast, that will make no sense, but we have to do it because that's the rule. You know, even though it makes no practical sense whatsoever, you can't do this project because we have a rule. You know, when there may be a practical solution or a reasonable accommodation. And I think that this is a good example of staff, you know, working with somebody, and they didn't get what they wanted, you know, but we still made a reasonable accommodation for them to let them get this project done, start getting income off it, making money, and we're guaranteed that the road will be built, or if not, we'll build it, you know, with their money. And so, it seems like a reasonable thing to do, rather than just tick somebody off and they're like, oh, we're not gonna do the project, you know, we'll do it somewhere else. So I think it's a win-win.
Thank you. Ms. Ben?
Thank you. A couple of questions regarding the timeline is 5 years. If it's not done, then ECUA has to do the road. Is there any, and we have an amount of money, $232,000 on this letter of credit. Is there any concerns that, what if inflation costs have risen to $300,000 construction cost? So is there any allowance for those types of things? And that's just the number I threw out, 300,000. But are there any allowance for inflation concerns? Or, in another question along that line, if the developer decides it's not what I'm doing, whatever comes up, is to sell the property, change of plans, and how that might ultimately would push the ECUA in having to actually complete the road project. So those are my questions on that. But I do think it's a way to go with a compromise and trying to achieve this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sorrell, do you want to?
No, there isn't an inflation component to this. The developer wanted a fixed cost, and basically we did too. We wanted to have a fixed amount. We knew what to deal with. We believe through our calculations that the amount of money will be sufficient to build a road. It's not going to be an improved road. It may just be a dirt or gravel road so that we can get our trucks in there. So we think it's more than sufficient to be able to provide the surface that we need.
Thank you. Dr. Walker?
I'm still bemused by the route. Now, the line going through the undeveloped property, is that a line where the developer is going to put a force main?
Mr. Sorrell?
Yes, that's correct.
He is going to put a force main there, okay. But he doesn't want to build a road for the time being. Is that?
He does not want to build the road at all, but if we have to maintain it, we need the road. So at such time that we have to maintain it, if he doesn't build the other subdivision, then we will build the road.
And we think that maybe for the first 5 years, we won't need to have a road to get in there?
We do not believe we will, that's for sure.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Got another one?
Well, I've seen a lot of subdivision plans. I've never seen one with such a meandering road going through the middle of it, right of way.
Ms. Ritz?
Oh, this is what I get for listening. Has anyone walked the wetlands and the wooded area to see what type of trees are there? Because when I heard the majestic oak, I thought, or heritage oak, I thought, has anyone walked? Is that why the pipeline meanders through the undeveloped area?
I believe that's what Mr. Perkins was saying, is that might be the reason for the meander.
Well, we don't know for sure, Chairman.
Do we know for sure, Mr. Sorrell?
Well, this is private property, okay, so it's up to the developer to do what he wants. The pipeline routing that you see here is probably not the final pipeline route. So he will adjust that accordingly based upon the field conditions. But it's private property, and we have no right to go in there and judge trees or walk around or anything. But it's however he wants to build it. It's on his property. As long as it works for us and we can build a road, we're satisfied.
May I continue?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I know I've read in the newspaper about groups in the county and the city being concerned about the leveling of trees, especially the older trees. And so that's why I bring this up. There are groups that are very concerned about the leveling of trees, because trees do provide a lot of resources for we humans.
Thank you. I've been reading a lot of that same thread lately. I wanted to commend staff for thinking out of the box on this. I agree with Mr. Perkins. You know, development, we could just say, no, you can't do it, and it would just stop. And I know the people out in that area need housing. So the fact that we're gonna allow them to do it and do it this way, I just wanted to commend staff for thinking out of the box on it. A letter of credit normally is a bank gives a letter of credit to the ECUA. It wouldn't be to the attorney, it'd be to the ECUA itself. And then if they don't build the road, then we could, go on the letter of credit. I've had to give a letter of credit in the past, so I'm familiar with them. And your bank, that has your money in there, but you don't wanna let go of your money, they say, we back this company, and if they don't make good on this, then we'll make good on it. So it's a promise from the bank, not necessarily the developer, saying that they have faith in the developer, and if he doesn't do it, then they'll pay it. So it's actually from the bank, and it would be to us. Just wanted to clarify that for Ms. Ritz. Ms. Schneier.
This may have already been answered, but where it says wetlands crossing, is that a bridge going over the wetlands, or are they gonna dig through it to bury the pipe, and how is the road gonna go through that?
Mr. Sorrell.
Yeah, I don't know that all those decisions have been made at this point. If it's a wetland crossing, we most likely are not gonna build a bridge. What we'd probably do is put in some kind of a piping assembly and so that we can transport over that. But normally we'll just build just a dirt road, put some gravel down, and that's the way we get in there with our trucks. But we're not gonna build a big bridge, I can guarantee you that.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, please vote. Good discussion. Thank you for all the great questions. And it passes 10-0. We move now to item J, fiscal year 2018 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, CAFR, on page 35. Mr. Sorrell.
Yes, ma'am, this is an informational item only, just to let you know that the audit has been completed. We have a new audit firm this year, and we were very, very pleased with them, very cooperative. They gave us a very, very clean audit. They didn't make any audit adjustments. They didn't find any concerns whatsoever. So it's a very clean audit. We're very, very happy with the firm. It's Malden and Jenkins. I think they're out of Fort Walton Beach, in that area anyway, and they just did a great job. Really, they spent quite a bit of time here. They sent the auditors over, and we have filed the comprehensive annual financial report to the GAP, that's Government Accounting Accepted Accounting Principles and Practices. And we'll see what we get, but we expect to win that award again. Be really surprised if we didn't, simply because we didn't have any audit adjustments. And if we get that, I think that's our 31st year that we'll have that. So that's the highest award you can possibly get for governmental accounting. So that's something to really brag about. Patty's not here today. She couldn't be here because of a family concern. But basically, she and her staff, and I think Justin's here. He can hold up his hand, but he's also a certified public accountant. So they've done a great job, and they're getting accolades, and they were very pleased with the new accounting firm.
Thank you. Ms. Benson.
Well, I'm glad to hear this firm was good. I still kind of miss Saltmarsh. They did our audits for so many years, and they're a local firm. And I recall having this firm make the winning presentation. When do we bid it again? How long does our agreement with them last?
Mr. Sorrell.
If I remember correctly, the award was made for the first year plus 2 additional years, so it'd be 3 years out. But they were very, very happy with this firm, so I don't think we have any concerns whatsoever.
Thank you. Nothing further. We move to item K, which is the 2020 operating budget on page 36. Mr. Sorrell.
Yes, ma'am. The CAC members and the board asked for presentations from the different departments on their budgets this year. So we're going to do it a little bit differently. Instead of allowing you to look over those, we're going to have the presentations made. Now, what you're going to hear today from each of the department directors will be at the department level. It won't get down to the different sections and divisions, but it'll be at the department level. You need to also realize that the numbers you see are probably not final. We don't know what the revenues are going to be yet, and won't know for at least 2 or 3 more months. So when we make these budget projections here, it's based on what we think we're gonna have, but we're not sure. So when the budget finally comes in, you'll get the final budget probably in the July timeframe. At that point in time, we'll have a better idea of the revenues, and we'll be able to match those against the expenses. What you're gonna see here today is really the expense side of the budget for each of the different departments. The first one is, I guess I'll start off, I get to do the first one. So it's a relatively small one. Ma'am?
Yes,
Madam Chairman, may I ask one question?
yes, Ms. Benson.
For as many years as I can remember, I have asked to have specific goals and objectives that are measurable as part of this, and I see a lot of the departments have done that, and I'm glad to see that. Is it possible, and I don't want to have to ask this of each department, is it possible to address how we did on last year's goals and objectives too, if we can, rather than just having new ones? I'd like some accountability on what our previous year's goals and objectives were.
Yes, ma'am, I've asked each of the directors to do that.
Okay.
So I'm one step ahead of you for a change, but I did ask them to do that, ma'am, and I'll just briefly hit the highlights of the ones that I have in the administration. It's probably one of the smallest budgets that are in there, and first off, the overall summary is just, my department is just relatively small. It's the director and the executive assistant. The responsibilities are basically the overall administration of the entire company, so I get to deal with a lot of different things. It's more or less, the budget I'm showing you is going to be a continuation budget. There's nothing really major in there, other than there's a cost center change, which I'll explain in a minute. The last year's targeted goals and objectives, big thing was we tried to keep the expenses close to the consumer price index, and I think you're going to see that this year. That's the way it looks, although we don't have all the operating budgets done yet. The 2018 management audit was another thing that I had as a goal to get that done. It was completed. It was a little bit late. It was completed, but it was very, very favorable for the ECUA. It indicated that the ECUA is one of the best managed utility companies in the state of Florida. The recommendations were in there, and you'll hear from each of the departments. Basically, they've all been done. So they were all very positive. And another item was the FDP consent order to try to get that worked out, and we have got that done, and we got that underway. And the last thing is it's a big one, but it's with the MRF. We're trying to make it somewhat self-supporting, and I think we're working on that. And some of the goals from last year are very, very, very similar. I indicated I'll analyze the quarterly reports from each of the departments. I get metrics from them and require those, and I analyze all those data, and then I summarize those to the board and tell them any changes or any major operational changes or anything that may be of a concern. So that's done on a regular quarterly basis, and again, the management audit was completed. If you turn to page 38, that's where the actual expenses are shown, and at the top you'll see a reduction in the salaries. We simply did a cost center change. The person who was doing a lot of the grant work and a lot of the other work for the offices has been transferred over to shared services, because a lot of those duties have been assigned to shared services, so it didn't make sense to have that person reporting to me. So you'll see a reduction there. And down under dues and subscriptions, I canceled one of the dues and subscriptions we had with the National Association of Clean Water Agencies, mostly because it was too expensive. And I communicated with the board on that. Their fees got to be really high. Moreover, they were having meetings in Hawaii and Las Vegas and a bunch of other places, which we didn't support. So I canceled their subscription. They actually have said that they're going to come back and give us a cut rate. They have not done that yet. So basically, there's a cut there, and overall, it's a reduction in the budget amount because of that. The second budget that I do is for the board, and basically it's just a continuation budget. Is somewhat of a guess, but you're going to have a new board member at some point, and there'll be those salaries will have to be included, and they'll be included on the Florida Retirement System pension plan. So they'll have the pension and they'll have the medical and so on, so we kind of had to take a guess at that. But those numbers are all included. But other than that, ma'am, it's just a continuation budget with a cost center change, and there should be sufficient funds in there for you to hire a new executive director at some point. And there's also a little bit in there so that we can have an overlap if necessary in order to have training. And essentially, that's the end of the budgets that I have to present. I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Ms. Benson?
And thank you, Mr. Sorrell. When we throw things at you, like hiring a lobbyist because we've got some projects that we want to put in the state budget, where's that shown in the budget? How do we deal with those things? If I might ask Mr. Sorrell.
Yes.
I'm going to have to ask Justin on where you put that. Where did you put those funds, Justin, for the hiring? Yeah, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Justin.
All right, good afternoon. Those funds are generally put in professional services. Last fiscal year, we had the management audit, and so it's almost a wash for the lobbyists for next year versus what we paid last year for the management audit. So there wasn't an increase in the overall cost there.
But it would show in professional services?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Dr. Walker, you might want to stick around just in case. Yeah, there you go. Dr. Walker?
And the money, I presume, came out of operating contingencies?
Yeah, I think part of it came out of operating contingencies, but, you know, every year we've had some money budgeted for consultants and professional services, so we didn't have to pull any extra money from contingency.
Thank you, Justin. Good question. Mr. Ponson?
The legal fees that are on here, is there some point where we need to consider hiring a staff attorney to take care of small stuff and farm out the big stuff?
There you go.
Do you want me to answer that, ma'am? Or
well,
do you want to answer that?
I would be happy to answer that. So, this board has asked that question many times. I've asked it personally myself very many times. Is there any reason we can give a copy of that part of the report, the management report to the CAC, sir?
No, ma'am, it's a public record. We can make copies of that and give it to them. What she's referring to is the management audit evaluated that particular thing and gave us a report back.
Yeah, and when you add in some of the things that an in-house attorney would need, like a secretary and a paralegal, and then you add in their insurance and their benefits and what have you, the audit said that we really are saving a lot of money by doing it the way that we're doing it. So I'm very happy that you asked that question, because I asked that question over and over and over, and they pretty much told me in black and white exactly the figures. So those figures are in here, and they'll get you a copy of it, so you can
Well,
see
no,
it
that's
too.
fine.
It's over 6 figures every year that we would
Sure.
save doing that.
Our company just did that, and it's been a nightmare with all of the new internal rules, but, but when I saw that big number, I thought, there's gotta be some point where it matters, but the point is we're not there.
Yeah,
Yep, awesome.
according to the management audit. Thank you.
Yep.
Very good question. Dr. Walker? I
would urge that all the committee members receive a copy of the management audit.
Exactly. Thank you. I have one question. Do we think that with a lobbyist that we still need a grant writer? I wasn't really sure. I know that our grant writer is no longer with us right now. And I know we might be looking for another grant writer, but do we really need one with the lobbyist?
Well, it's two different functions, two totally different functions, and we are going to continue with our grant requests, but we found that they are much more limited than we originally thought. So we're going to incorporate those duties in with some other duties and have a multi-talented person do a whole bunch of different things and really give some relief to Sharon and Sherry to some degree, and do grant writing and everything all in one. And we're looking for that person right now, but the lady who was doing it is no longer with us.
Okay. Thank you, sir. All right. Ms. Benson?
And just to respond, the functions of a lobbyist and a grant writer are really
Yeah.
lobbyists typically don't even know what grants are available,
Yeah.
because those come from the agencies, and they're lobbying the legislature to make rules. So, there aren't a lot of grants, but,
right.
one can pay for the services, so it's always good to have somebody pursuing those.
Yeah. Mr. Kimball?
So, since we're talking about a lobbyist, I just had questions. I mean, are we in a long-term agreement with this lobbyist firm, and are they seeing much success so far in this session? I know it's not really related to the budget, but since we're talking about a lobbyist, I had a question, if that's okay.
That's a great question. I asked it this morning. Go right
I think
ahead.
Mrs. Benson can probably answer that better than me.
Well, thank you. I did go to Tallahassee and met with the lobbyists and met with some of the people in Tallahassee. We probably are on a 2-year track with our asks. You know, we're asking for money for Brownsville, Gulf Beach Highway, and Navy Boulevard. There is money right now in the budget for sewer, septic to sewer, not nearly as much as the requests that have come in. We were not in the original governor's budget, which is not a surprise, but, and I don't want to get too inside baseball, but the subcommittee chair who hears all of these things is expecting another infusion of money from some Seminole tribe funds and some other things. And if that comes through, we are a priority to get into that budget. Now, I don't know if it's going to happen, but that is sort of in the pipeline, we hope. We also were able to get, we had requested that the bill be filed in the House. There have to be companion bills. We were able to get Senator Broxton to file a bill in the Senate, so now that we do have the companion bills, all of these kind of mechanical things lobbyists take care of, and they stay on top of it, and we've had good reports. I would be very surprised if we get the money this year, but I think we're on track for making our case for next year.
Thank you, Ms. Benson. I asked those same questions this morning, and one of the questions that I asked was, I belong to a couple of associations that have lobbyists, and we get a report. I'm not sure if it's monthly or quarterly or whatever, and so I asked if we could ask our lobbyists for some kind of written report for, you know, the board and CAC, so I think that will be forthcoming. Any further questions on that, administration or board? If not, we move to information technology, and I assume John
Donna.
John's coming. There he is. Mr. Donna and I are on a direct line now.
Good afternoon. I'm not sure where you want to start. Do you want to start with the numbers or last year's goals? I'm happy to start wherever you'd like.
Probably goals.
Okay. So last year's goals, I try to keep them as pointed as possible, not too convoluted. Our major goal in IT is, of course, replacing the ERP system. And because the ERP system sits on top of everything else, everything beneath there has to be solid, stable, reliable. If you build a wobbly foundation and you put something big on top, it's just going to fall off and land on the ground, and that's not where we want it. And so my goals kind of support building that solid infrastructure, making sure that all the pieces are in place so that that big ERP thing is going to sit there and work the way we want it. And so the ERP was also mentioned in the master plan. So whenever I look at my goals for the next year, I look at my master plan and I look at the components that are in the master plan and kind of piece them in about, you know, what part is next and what things do we have to do in the coming year. So of all the accomplishments that we targeted, we met them all. Some of them we exceeded a little bit, but most of them, we met all of them. We did our disaster recovery testing. We replaced the phone system. We continued documenting systems, upgrading Windows PCs to Windows 10, replacing computers on our 5-year cycle. And so all those things were all met and accomplished, all the ones that we set out to do in the previous year.
I think we have a question, Mr. Perkins.
I know that we had talked about an ECUA app like Gulf Power has, where people can, you know, connect and find out, you know, where the garbage trucks are and you know, where the breaks are and when service will be back and stuff. Are we Still working toward that?
Absolutely, sir. We, all of that is going to tie into that ERP system again. So once that thing is in place, we're easier able to move data from one side to the other and connect the dots from business processes. Right now, we're still stuck with that archaic system that we have. And so until that ERP is done and it's up and running, and that's when we can start connecting all the cool stuff.
Thank you.
So kind of along the same line for next year's goals, again, it supports the master plan, it supports the ERP, it supports building the infrastructure. We're going to continue to disaster recovery test some of the major applications because we want to know if there is a disaster that you can rebuild and continue operating with, you know, with that thing broken and then you got to go and repair it again. We think of scenarios like the building is shut down and we're running out of the CWRF building, for example. Maybe we're having operations there. We're going to build a connection to the county's EOC department so that we have a direct fiber connection into there so that we can mimic ECUA's network inside the ECUA or inside the EOC, just like people are sitting here. And all these things help to make that disaster recovery, that disaster preparedness a little easier to transition. The last thing you want is that if there is a disaster, that you're not able to rebuild those systems and recover that data and get all that stuff back to where it was before the disaster. And so we look at the hurricane scenarios. I look at, you know, when hurricanes happen, like in Panama City and those, and I look at, you know, what the IT departments did for the governments and how they recovered and what they did. And so I think about those things and kind of build it in. And so we test our major systems every year and make sure that we can fail them over and we can replace them, we can stand them back up, and we can rebuild them whenever we have to. It's critical. We're going to continue replacing all the desktops. By the end of last year, we were at a point that the oldest computer was about 6 years old. We want to get to a point where the oldest computer is 5 years old. And the second thing that we're kind of pressed with is Windows 7 support from Microsoft ends in January of next year. And so we have to not only replace the computers that are still old, but we also have to upgrade the operating systems that are running Windows 7 and get them on Windows 10. And we're about 10% of the way done there. So, you know, another goal is to complete that entire transition, which is going to take all hands on deck for a couple of weeks and really push hard to get those computers updated. Because the last thing we want is to have operating systems that aren't supported by Microsoft anymore so that you can't get the new downloads and the patches and things to keep everything secure and, you know, keep it away from hackers and ransomware and all that ugly stuff. And so keeping the operating systems up to date is a critical component of that. So we're going to make sure that we meet that goal of getting every computer updated. And lastly, the budget. My budget's pretty weeny in a ECUA sense. It hovers around the 450,000. When I started at ECUA, I had a philosophy of, you know, making things better, faster, but also cheaper. And so my budget, just slowly over time, is shrinking. It's going down. It's becoming to the point where we're probably at that sweet spot where I'm not going to be able to make it much cheaper than what it is right now. So in my budget request, you'll see a lot of number in brackets, which means, you know, the numbers are going down, the costs are going down. We're replacing things with things that are better and less costly. And so at the end of it, it looks like I'm going to have a $17,000 increase in my budget, which is probably more at the personnel level. But when the budget was made, I was fully staffed. And right after we set this budget, one of my long-term employees decided to retire. Now, his salary was at the top of the pay scale, and we're interviewing to replace that person, and we hire at the beginning of the pay scale. And that's probably about a $20,000 difference. So once we hire that person, we reset these numbers, that $17,000 will become brackets with a 3 in it. So we'll be able to drop the budget there a little bit again because of the person moving.
Thank you. Mr. Ponson?
One question. You said earlier that the goal is to get the ERP up and then you can start adding the cool stuff. What is the time frame on that cool stuff starting?
So personally, I think the ERP by itself is already pretty pretty cool. I mean, compared to what we have now, it's like the Fred Flintstones mobile versus a Tesla, right? I mean, you couldn't think of any two more opposites. So the ERP by itself, I think, is very cool. All the things we can do with it that we can't do today, workflow management, the tie-ins with finance, and work orders. I mean, you name it. Everything is going to flow a lot easier and smoother. And then once we have that, part of the ERP is some of the cool things, like being able to get on the web and paying your bill. And some of those things are part of the ERP. So the cool things will come at that same time. The time frame to go live with the whole final product is still 2 years away, right? It's still a massive undertaking. Right now, we just got finished with finance. Finance is implemented. We're busy going through training with finance for the next 2 or 3 months so that they can learn how to use the system. And then we'll go live with the finance part on October 1 when we start the new fiscal year. And that's going to be one of those, I didn't even know how to tell you, but everybody's going to be crossing their fingers and, praying kind of hard that it all works. And then once that's done, before we go live with finance, we're going to start with HR and get benefits and payroll and all the personnel management things, get all that pulled in there. That's going to take another 6 or 8 months. And then we'll start with billing and customer service. And so another 2 years of hard work on this is what, unfortunately, it's a big deal. It's a big application.
Ms. Benson?
Do we have a policy for employees using their computers for personal emails and for things other than work? And I assume we have firewalls that protect our system from outside bugs that are brought in by personal emails. But what is our policy?
So the policy of doing personal things on work computers is more of a management thing than what it is really an IT thing. But what we do have is we have plenty of firewalls in place. So anybody who does anything on an ECUA computer inside the ECUA network, it's firewalled, it's monitored. We monitor the internet traffic. We keep an eye on the stuff going in and out. And so it's a continuous process.
Like Big Brother, or are there just mechanical systems that I betray my naivete? My mother every day gets a new bug on her computer that we're trying to get off. So we must have something that protects against things like my mother gets. But how is this done? I mean, surely you're not, watching over all the employees. How do we protect it?
Let's see if I can find it easy. I guess the easiest way to explain it is there's policies that apply on a firewall, and one of them is the pornography websites. I don't know, I don't want to use that word in public, but the dirty stuff, okay? And so there's a policy that says no dirty stuff. So if I try to get on my computer and try to go to a dirty website, immediately the firewall will block it, say you don't have any access to this. The same from those kind of websites trying to come back into the network, that same block is applied. So, and then we have blocks for foreign countries. There's a rule in the firewall that says, I want to block foreign countries. And all the foreign countries are in all their IP ranges. But we may need something from Canada or something from Mexico or something from Great Britain. And then we have to tweak the firewall a little bit to allow that specific IP address range inside the firewall. So, and it's hard to explain, but there's a lot of systems that are protecting us from the outside world.
Thank you.
I would like to commend you on what you've done so far. I own a very, very small company, and we're redoing a lot of software right now. You know how that is. Every 5 years you have to. And we have a new doc record system, and it's taken a year. I'm telling you, I have 4 employees. I have 70 contractors, but 4 employees, and it's taken a year to get the system up and really going in the right direction. It's a wonderful system, but all that you're doing in 4 years is truly amazing to me.
Thank you very much.
I'm so happy that when 2021 rolls around, but I know it sounds like a long time to some people, but it sounds.
That's when I'll take my first vacation.
It sounds really quick to me. Thank you, John.
You're more than welcome.
I appreciate all the time that you spend answering questions too.
No problem.
We now go to Human Resources and Administrative Services.
That'll be Kim Scruggs.
There's Miss Kim.
She's only been in the job a week, but you're going to be impressed with her knowledge and some of the things that she knows, and she'll say she's a very knowledgeable lady.
Okay, thank you. So I'll follow John, and I'll just start off with the 2019 goals that we established. Our primary focus in establishing the goals was a focus towards, of course, compliance, being HR, also towards health, safety, and training, and the development of employees. That's where we feel like we have the biggest impact to help the organization be successful. And we are like right on target, and most of our goals we've actually accomplished already. So for instance, just as an example, under health and wellness, we had a goal to exceed our 2018 participation by at least 5%, and we blew that out of the water. So we were well above that, not only in the biometric screenings, which, as you probably realize, there's information at an aggregate level that's collected during those studies or during those in the screening process, that we in turn go back and develop educational programs and then feed that back to the employees, and that's based on the high-risk areas of our employee population. We feel that we can impact the health insurance claims ratio and while making employees more aware of their health status. So that one accomplished. As you scroll through, for instance, down in the recruiting area, so one of our goals was to attend at least 6 job fairs, local job fairs, and to date this year, we're halfway through the year, we've attended 3. We have a couple of more on the radar. Our most recent was at the Worlds of Possibilities on April 8th. I want to say there was, I may have my numbers wrong, but it was over 500 that they had interaction with. So it was a great turnout, good exposure for ECUA, and introducing the public to the jobs that we have available. As you know, we have a pretty wide array from sanitation all the way to the engineering staff to finance, HR, and just introducing people to what we have available, drawing people in. Let's see. Some more that we have accomplished to update the Human Resources Manual. So that was one of Cindy Sutherland's final marks right before she left, is we have a complete update to our Human Resources Manual, and that was published on April 5th. So again, checking that off, as well as down under the risk management, updating the emergency response plan. And as John mentioned, it's important for us to be prepared during times of emergency and have systems and processes in place to get us back up and running and respond appropriately to those disasters that can occur and to unforeseen circumstances. Thankfully, we have a plan in place for that. The next area, and I'm just kind of hitting some high points, so if you have some specific questions, please feel free to ask. Under training, we recently completed a 4-hour defensive driver training our safety specialist did with all of Randy's sanitation area. So that was an area, it's like, okay, we've got some accidents occurring, let's hit this and let's hit it hard with some defensive driving training and give them some tools in their toolbox to pull from and hope to remedy some of that. So we've trained all the sanitation staff, hoping to branch out into regional services in the coming months. Let's see, we implemented a new learning management system. So we've had a system in the past. This is one of those online systems. You can log in, you can, it's on demand, so a person can say, and actually I used it recently for something I was looking for Word. So a desktop application. Let's say you've got an office staff, they're new to Publisher or some desktop application. They can jump out there and grab some training. It's a subscription we pay for, so it's all included in that, and it's on demand, which is really nice, helps for the employee population. We've got the, and then we recently finished up the drug screening training, so every 2 years we provide drug-free workplace training to all of our supervisors to keep us in compliance with the drug-free workplace program, and we've just recently completed that. So the HR staff's been pretty busy this year, just accomplishing goals right and left. We've got new goals, of course, established for 2020, already making a plan of how we're going to accomplish those. I should mention, under the safety area, we had a goal to I guess you install AEDs in multiple locations of ECUA, and to also provide the training. And as of this morning, I got an update from Dave. We've actually installed 13 devices throughout various locations of ECUA and provided the necessary training to the staff in those areas. So, any questions? I know that was pretty quick.
No, that's
overview.
good.
Is there one of these AEDs in here? I might need it when we do this budget.
Actually, just outside the door here on the other side of the receptionist. Yes.
Ms. Benson?
Is anybody anticipating, and I'm thinking of the national level, but certainly your circles, I mean, you have organizations, what will happen with the expansion of medical marijuana and also the legalization that's state by state, and it's coming? You know, are people developing model protocols for handling this with the workforce?
Fortunately, I've just gone through the drug-free workplace training, so I'll share with you what I learned. Because at this point in time, our area, Florida, doesn't have. Let me back up. We have decided as an organization we're going to follow the federal laws on that, and so that's what we've been advised by our council at this point in time. And so, you know, at the point in time that there are changes that affect this area, then that will be revisited by the attorneys. But as of right now, a positive drug screen result for marijuana would result in disciplinary action, just because we have a zero tolerance here at ECUA. So I know that didn't really answer your question. It's one of those areas that we're keeping a close eye on, anticipating that there will be changes coming in the next couple of years, and working closely with council to make sure that we stay in compliance.
I mean, I think if I
Yep,
may
no,
continue.
continue.
There are states that already have legalized marijuana, and, you know, obviously it has an impact on a driver, but it's suddenly a legal thing, and I guess you treat it like alcohol. But it's a different entity, and I think it would be wise to look at some of these states and what kind of models they are developing, because it's coming. And so, yeah.
And to be prepared.
And it certainly affects our workforce,
It does.
particularly with the CDLs.
Thank you. Mr. Ponson?
You said there's a zero tolerance. What about prescription? I mean, it's out there and it's getting common.
So we were informed during the training we recently went through that there is no such thing as a medical marijuana prescription. It's basically a certification, as I understand it. So it's not something that we recognize under our policy. So even if someone were to produce a medical certification for that and they were to test positive in our program, it would result in discipline.
I think we need to look at that. I mean, there's a lot of good benefits coming out. It's gonna be a fine line to walk for a long time.
Right.
But I know at least one person whose life has been changed dramatically since the medical got here, and you know, I'm far from a believer that we need open public, but I am starting to get convinced that the medical side of this, and we probably need to really serious look at how some of this stuff is done. So.
Mr. Kimball?
So I can kind of echo that. You know, we deal with companies all over the country, and so it's pretty common that if a company receives money from the federal government, that regardless of what the state says, they have to treat it as still an illegal substance, because the government says, if you don't, we will cut off your funding to you. So that's typically been the stance of, so if there's, you know, I think that it's probably the right stance at this point to do that. So yeah, that's typically been the stance that I've seen.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments for Mr. Kimball?
I do have a different question. I probably asked this last year. What, on the budget, consultant services and professional services, what is that?
Okay, so I brought my handy dandy list here.
Sorry.
So consultant services are things such as, y'all probably recall Gearing Group. We had come in and consult on our benefits program. So those would be the consultant services. Professional services, and let me just find it here, I don't have these memorized on my list here. So for instance, our drug-free workplace programs, that falls under professional services. And we contract with drug-free workplaces, and then we pay them a fee. They come in, provide our training, and then they also provide the medical review officer services of the drug screenings. That's what's under that category.
Thank you, Kim.
You're welcome. Okay.
I think it's great that staff hears so much of what's said on the board with your talks about HSAs and health, and then you win in this award. It's very interesting. I had said revamp the employee performance review. We talked about that, 3 years ago? And then recruiting, I always remembered Mr. McCorvey talking about recruiting over and over. So it's really nice to see when you come and give these goals, and I appreciate that, Ms. Benson. Give the goals and objectives and whatever, that we hear our voices echo in your report. So thank you very much.
And for us, it gives us a sense of accomplishment, too.
Yes.
You know, being able to track. So for the budget, just moving on to the budget, for the most part, HR's proposed budget is a continuation budget. You'll notice that we do have one cost center change, and that was where we absorbed the security guards from shared services over into the risk management division budget. And then there was a request for additional $1,500. We want to subscribe to a safety training video service through a vendor, and that would help with the monthly safety talks. So Dave goes out to our various locations multiple times a month and meets with our crews in the mornings and provides safety training. And so we would like to have an additional $1,500 there. And then there's also some FSA admin fees that was inadvertently left out of this year's budget, and so we're wanting to put those back in for next year.
Mr. Perkins.
I see on obtained certification for ECUA's senior safety and training specialist in the area of CPR and first aid. Will that person then be able to teach CPR and first aid to our employees?
That's the
So
goal,
that could save us
yes.
a lot of money.
Yes,
right there.
that's
great.
the goal.
Very good. Thank you, Kim.
Any other
Any
questions?
further questions? Comments? Thank you, Kim. Appreciate you. And next we have engineering, Mr. Stacy Hayden.
Madam Chairman,
Oh,
I'm
yes.
sure I'm glad we're doing this.
Me too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the CAC. Well, that was an example of how to do it right. I'll try to keep up the momentum here. The engineering department is responsible for the planning, design, construction management of the upgrades and extension of the water and the wastewater system. Our goals are rather vague and broad because there are just so many little nuances that we have to, or little projects that we have to do to accomplish our goals. And if we were to list those, it'd be extremely long and run on and on. The goal that we had for, some of the goals we had for last year were much of the same for this year, to ensure the orderly growth of the water and wastewater systems. Well, each year we take in, I think in the past it's been an average of about 40 to 50 developer applications. This year we closed out with close to 80, and we were bordering on 90. So the number of developments have increased substantially, and so we have to take a look at our policy. We have to take a look at our hydraulic models to make sure that we can provide water and wastewater to these developments and see where improvements need to be made. One of the other goals is to provide the board with information necessary to establish policies. Policy issues come in, again, with development. They could come in with how we repair and maintain our system, and we work with our regional services department and our treatment plant department to look at our policies and update them as necessary. We also want to cost-effectively comply with the requirements and deadlines established in the SSO consent order. I'm reading this off to you, but essentially, we have one of our cost centers, the wastewater infrastructure group, we have absorbed or will be absorbing into the engineering department. I've lived and breathed the wastewater infrastructure department for over a decade, and now have transitioned into the executive type role. What that means is, when Mr. Holcomb will be retiring soon, and we will not be replacing him as a director, it will be as a manager. So with those responsibilities, we will have oversight of the consent order requirements and the corrective action plan. We've negotiated with DEP, and that's going to be about $8 million a year. So we have to oversee all those projects that need to be done. If they don't get done, we face some, could face some fines and additional SSOs. Some of our objectives is to evaluate the system needs and recommend projects to maintain or achieve adequate levels of service for ECUA. Going back to the water and sewer models, that is one of the best tools for us to see what's going on in our system and gives us an idea of what upgrades we need to make to serve our customers better and deal with the upcoming development. The other thing other item that's very vital to ECUA is the design and construction improvements to our engineering manual. We want to make sure that that's continually updated with material, engineering and design standards and inspection standards as well. You'll notice in part of our actual budget items that we have requested an increase in our budget to send our inspectors to get trained properly. They've and gain additional certifications as required by DEP. They do operate the water and the sewer system occasionally when development is being constructed, and they have to maintain, first of all, they have to obtain and then maintain an FDEP certification to operate the water and wastewater system, similar to what our regional services folks do. Again, that's a broad stroke of our goals from last year and from this year. If you have any questions, I'll open it up at this time.
Ms. Benson.
Give me, so I can see in my head, an org chart. You are over everything that happens at the central wastewater facility. What comes under your purview?
We are just responsible for the engineering and design and construction of that work.
Okay.
Any operations falls under Randy Sears. Any maintenance work falls under Jerry Piscopo.
Okay. So there is a national building code, and then you subscribe to different things. And when you talk about your engineering manual, Stacy, Mr. Hayden, is there a national model, or are we stricter, are we looser, or how do we fall in that?
Right. Well, Arcadis, or the consultant that performed the management audit, did look at our standards compared with the national standard and determined that we are where we need to be. I understand that some other folks may feel we're a little tougher. However, when we're faced with look at our history of failures, and that's where we look at what do we need to improve. For instance, our force main, our piping pressure ratings, we have increased in our engineering manual, increased the pressure rating in our engineering manual, and we hope that that isn't the intended result, is that it would prevent some of those breakages in the future.
And if I might
Yeah,
continue.
please continue.
We constantly, not constantly, but sometimes hear criticism that we're too tough and on developers and others. And since you have been here, I think there is a very customer-friendly attitude. That's certainly what I'm hearing, and I think it's important to have that kind of attitude conveyed to our customers. But I also agree that we need to have tough standards as well. Do you meet with a lot of how do you broker that?
In a number of ways, and there is room for improvement. I'll be the first to say that. I think communication is key, and as a matter of fact, I spoke with Mr. Sorrell very briefly about that this morning, that communication is key between ECUA and developers. I think they understand why our design standards are strengthened, but they just need to have somebody present why. If they don't have the why, sometimes they're taken aback, like, you're making me pay for this or that, and it's like, no, we're not trying to be hard on developers. We're trying to look out for the ratepayers.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Walker?
I think you said typically we have about 15 or 20 projects presented to us by developers annually, and this year we have 80 or 90.
I think he said 40 or 50, and now we have 80 or 90.
Yes, ma'am, yes, sir. Typically, in the past, we've had averaged about 40 or so per year.
Okay.
This year, we had a substantial increase, essentially doubled what we have in the past.
Well, my question is, it's still the same question. This increase, we're handling it without additional staff?
Yes, sir, we are, without additional staff. It's a little tight, but this past year, we were low on CIP projects where we could shift some things around, but with the development projects coming in, increasing, and the CIP projects increasing, we're going to have to find a way to do more with less. So.
Okay.
Mr. Perkins?
And the one good thing about all that development, I mean, there are pluses and minuses, but the one good thing about it is it should result in a heck of a lot more monthly revenue. And you get those revenues coming in, then you can hire, more people that just needed to do it. So, yeah, it's a challenge, but, sometimes it helps take care of itself.
Agree. Mr. Kimball?
You mentioned the training and certifications. How many people does that equate to that are going to go get trained and certified? I was just curious.
We have 6 inspectors and 1 inspector supervisor. The 6 inspectors will all have to have the DEP certification for both water and wastewater system operations. We also look at other certifications as well. We have a NACE Level 3 up at our treatment plant sites that he looks at coatings and things of that nature, make sure that protective coatings are applied like they should, and that's where we've seen a lot of failures. What we'd like to do is send 1 or 2 of the inspectors to the same type of inspections, certification courses, and get them certified in that as well to further protect ECUA.
Thank you. Ms. Benson?
What is the turnaround time, if I might ask him, between the application for a project and us giving approval? How long does that usually take?
It varies. There are a number of components that can make that length of time vary. Typically, we try to turn it around within 45 days. That reason for being, if the project has a lift station, there's additional department reviews come in there. If there are comments that ECUA staff have to make to drawings, design drawings, then they have to go back and get revised and resubmitted, and then we can eventually send out plan approval. But our target is 45 days, and it can run longer depending on when we get materials back in for review.
And if I might continue,
Yes, please.
When you listen to people about construction and industry, that seems like kind of a long time to kind of sit on a set of plans and get approval. How do we compare to other similar agencies in that?
I'm afraid I can't answer that at the moment. I don't know the answer.
It'd be interesting to know.
I think DEP may have a 30-day or actually 60-day turnaround time for their permit applications. We don't sit on anything. We try to get it out the door as soon as we can. But I understand the perception by some of the development community that we sit on stuff, but we're just trying to, look out for ECUA. So
Sure.
sometimes those reviews take a little longer than we'd like, but to get all parties' opinions.
And that wasn't designed as a complaint. I just
No,
have
no.
never known how long that takes. So you have inspections along the way when a project is under construction, I assume. When someone calls in for an inspection, what's the lead time for one of these inspections?
Well, we ask for 48 hours advance notice. Sometimes we get 10 minutes notice. We try to work with the contractors or the developers. We may get a contractor wanting a pressure test completed the same day. We try to accommodate that whenever we can, but in some cases that's very difficult, and we do get complaints about, hey, your guy walked off, and that's not necessarily the case. We try to accommodate every contractor that we can. Sometimes, we need that advance notice so we can schedule him appropriately because he may be headed off to another pressure test.
Yeah. So what I think I'm hearing is that at the beginning, there's kind of a long time while we scrutinize the plans very carefully, but during the course of the project, usually there's not a lot of lead time for the inspections they need to continue their construction.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Schneier?
How much growth can the Central Water Reclamation Facility handle? I mean, at what point will it be overloaded with all these new developments?
We have built-in capacity, additional capacity at the plant, and not only that, it was designed to easily add capacity in the future. I believe don't quote me on this, I believe our average daily flow is around 16 or so million gallons per day, but we've got well over that in capacity at the plant. I don't know that exact number, but I can get back to you with that.
Mr. Perkins?
And when the plant was designed, it was designed to be easily expandable, so we could expand it. And I'm hoping that with some of our I&I reduction, that may give us even a longer time frame and increased capacity as we reduce the flows going in there, and we're not treating stormwater, hopefully.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, true. Dr. Walker?
As I understand it, we're using about 16 million gallons a day right now. It's permitted for 20, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I
It's
believe that's
permitted for 20, but the actual capacity of the plant is considerably higher than that. So,
We've actually gone over that.
oh, well, we do go over it on individual days,
Yeah.
high volume days. We go over it twice, we may
Twice
go to
as much.
40 million
It
gallons.
was April monsoon
Yeah.
a couple of years back, we had real high numbers.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, so, but it has a lot of capacity, substantial. I worry more about the Bayou Marcus plant capacity than I do about the central.
Thank you. Mr. Sorrell?
Yes, ma'am, I wanted to tell you, you're getting a little far afield with Stacy. He doesn't have anything to do with the plants.
I know.
You're asking him questions that he's not supposed to know, but he does. Basically, the plants run 12 to 15 MGD, and it's rated 22.5, but it'll do a whole lot more than that if we push it. So, and it's also modular by design, which means we can expand it if we have to. Stacy does the engineering and a lot of the technical stuff, but the guys that run the plant will be here at a later date, and you can ask them those questions, and they'll be able to give you a
Probably
better
next
answer
month.
than me.
Or maybe June. I had one question. I know the engineering manual is online. Is the overall ECUA master plan somewhere that, or can a copy be?
It's being revised at the moment. That's part of what the hydraulic modeling is going to help us out with. It needs to be updated. It hasn't been updated in a very long time. It's not available electronically, but I can certainly provide some older copies if you would like to see them.
That would be
Anyone
great.
would like to see them. So,
And I would like to echo Ms. Benson's talk about you, Stacy. I have heard nothing but good comments about your communication skills, so thank you very much. Sometimes it's just the way you communicate, and communication is the key to success, and you're doing a good job. Thank you very much.
thank you, ma'am.
And thank you for, developers, they don't call you in the middle of the day because they're working on whatever they're working on. They call you after 5 o'clock. And it's not uncommon. I'm in District 1 where the most growth is. So it's not uncommon for Stacy and I to be on the phone till 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And I really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Does anyone you want to continue?
Well, do you have any questions about our, budget increases or decreases for each category? I can go over some of those, the larger items if you need, or if you didn't have any questions.
Does anybody have any questions? If you want to point out any of the larger ones.
I think I've already pointed out a few of those. One is the inspector training and certifications. The second was the hydraulic modeling software for the water system. Our existing software is antiquated. The developer is no longer supporting that, so we have to upgrade it, and that's a substantial cost. And the other thing was, what I didn't mention was our manhole level monitoring. What this is, there are devices that go in manholes, and they do essentially that. They monitor the levels And then that way, if there's a backup in our sewer system, it alerts our SCADA system. We can then preemptively strike. If there's possibly going to be an SSO, we can send our VAT trucks out and hopefully prevent a spill. What we can do with those also is do some flow monitoring, and we use that again to determine where we need to take our rehabilitation efforts in whatever subdivision or area of our system. And that would be to supplement, I'm getting down the weeds here, that would be to supplement our long-term flow monitoring, but the long-term flow monitors aren't as easily transportable and move from place to place as quickly.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you very much, Stacy. Appreciate your time. We move now to shared services and Mr. Rudd. Your mic.
Shared services covers several departments, and I overview those. Some of those have already been presented, but so they've given you the story already, but I'll highlight some issues. But basically, shared services covers information technology, public information, customer service, and the sanitation departments, also fleet maintenance and facilities maintenance. Some of the goals that we had last year were the ERP replacement timeline, making sure that stays on track, and John's done an excellent job with that. We wanted to reduce the number of abandoned calls in customer service by 2%. I'll steal some of Gabe's thunder and let you know that we reduced it by 27%. So we really exceeded that. That's a testimony to John and Gabe and his team. Some of that was through technology changes. A lot of it was through staffing and training in customer service, and the board approving a couple of additional positions. So that all worked to meet that goal. We wanted to improve the number of customers that visited the website by 2%. Again, we increased that by 21%. So we are in the process of revamping the website. There's a meeting tomorrow to look at that. That's almost completed. Hope to have that done by the end of the month. So that will be ongoing. And to have additional presentations at community events and other events regarding fog. And I can tell you, Jim Roberts goes to pretty much every event in the county. So we've covered pretty much all of those. So those were our FY19 goals for FY20. Same thing, continue the IT plan replacement. Continue to work on reducing the abandoned calls. I tell you, that's going to be tough. For the last 2 months, we've averaged 15 abandoned calls a day. I can tell you probably most of those are robocalls, sales calls that just get dropped as soon as they get into our system. So the customer service staff and the IT staff have done a fabulous job, in my opinion, on that issue. There again, we're revamping the website, so we want to continue to watch the number of hits we have on that. We're going to continue to promote the residential recycling program. The Recycle Star program is part of that, and try to grow that base by 2%. There again, we're up to about 73% total customers using the system, so it's going to get harder and harder to continue to grow that. And finally, increase our participation in community events by 4%. That's going to be another tough one because I think Jim's already going to everything there is. So that's pretty much it. Mr. Sorrell covered the one big change in our budget numbers, and that was the transfer of the grants writer's position. I will let you know there is one substantial grant that we are working on, and that's part of the VW settlement through the state of Florida. And they have about $8 to $10 million available a year for alternative fuel vehicles. Several years ago, they did grant of $250,000 a year. We got that every year it was available. And we are going to continue to try to get some of that VW funding. State's still working on the guidelines, but with our fleet and CNG, we have a very good chance of getting some funding from that program. So that is something that we will be working on. So,
Thank you.
any questions?
Any questions? Mr. Kimball?
800 phone system, is that just a regular phone system, or is that for an 800 number?
No, sir, that is the push-to-talk phones that the
Okay.
crews use in the field.
Okay, gotcha, okay.
Thank you, Ms. Benson.
I'm fascinated that we get robocalls. It never occurred to me. I thought they were all calling me, you know? I didn't know that. But, so what happens? They get in a queue and then they,
Drop it. Yep.
that's an interesting problem.
I wish John could come fix that in my
I know,
office.
exactly, exactly. Do we have any goals regarding our Facebook, like certain number of posts and that sort of thing?
No, we can work on that, though. I mean, it's a fairly new
Yeah.
outlet, but yeah, we can work on it.
I think it would be
developing a goal.
interesting
Yeah.
to develop some goals about how many posts, what areas, because I think it supplements what we're doing on the website. And so, anyway, that would be something.
Yes, ma'am, we'll look into that.
Yeah, I appreciate the feedback on that too, that we've been getting from Natalie in the reports. Ms. Schneier?
Are the community events posted anywhere?
We post some of them on our website, but Jim mainly is going to events that have already been planned by other and promoted by other agencies.
Yeah, it's usually like runs or, you know, bicycle events or, you know, that we get invited to. But I used to always laugh because I would see Rick Harper all year long, you know, I mean, because he would go and talk to different civic groups. And now every time I turn around, it's like, Jim Roberts, Jim Roberts, Jim Roberts. So good job, Jim. You're out there everywhere, like the little bunny. Thank you, Randy. Anybody have any further questions, then we can. Dr. Walker?
I would like to say that I know that a 73% participation rate in a recycling program is a good figure. That's nationally, by nationwide standards, that's a good figure. In fact, we may have too much participation. We may need to get rid of some customers who are causing the contamination rate to be higher than we like. And I know that staff is working on all of that, but 73% is a very good figure.
Certainly is. Thank you. And I want to echo again, thank you so much. I know this was very time-consuming for the CAC and the board, and I know it was time-consuming for the staff, but it's exactly what Ms. Benson's asked for several years, and we all appreciate it, getting all this information. We move now to our final item, item L, well, not final item, but item L, capital improvement budget. Oh, I'm sorry, did I
Customer
skip
service,
somebody?
ma'am.
Oh, Gabe, I am so sorry. I skipped Gabe. How can I skip you? Sorry about that, Gabe.
Afternoon, I should say. I'm going to go over some of our goals from last year. We had a tough year because what drives customer service is the bodies. If you don't have the bodies there to answer those calls, process that paperwork, you're going to see the abandons just go up, up, and up. The stress level up, up, and up. Retention out of the door. I have some good numbers to report to you, but some of the things we tried to do was to work on the average speed of answer. That's every call that comes into customer service. We have what is called an ACD, Automatic Call Distribution Center. That's what a phone system is. So what it does, it takes those calls. You have different queues. We have about 7. And I press that I want an emergency. That center automatically sends it to emergency. What we found was happening back in 2018 with the retention rate and the turnover and FMLA, because we had probably about 16 people on FMLA at that point in time. We were fighting with all of that and trying to answer the calls with a very, very high stress level in customer service. So the sickness was just going through the roof. But just to give you guys an example of what has this turnaround that we have had with the new phone system and being able to route the Easy Pay calls that have taken about 4,500 to 5,000 calls that now will come into our distribution center that will automatically go to Easy Pay. And what the representatives had to do before then, they took that call from that customer, it would hold until they connect to Easy Pay. So therefore, you had a line that was in hold, and it could have been for a minute or two as the abandons increased. So we no longer have that. That was an accomplishment with the help of our IT department and the new phone system that we added. So what we have been focusing on is training. Anyone knows that working in customer service, you got to have some type of training on how to relieve the stress, how to be more focus-centered so that you can handle that call after call, because sometimes you might get 3 or 4 calls that's not very pleasant. And I was there. I was on the phones before, back in '94. And I can tell you my first 2 weeks, I wanted to I looked at my colleague and said, you know what, I'm not coming back. I really did. So I want to recognize my supervisory staff, John, Jamie, and Rita, with the successes that we have so far. 2018, the average speed of answer was 2 minutes. It took us 2 minutes. This quarter, 18 seconds. Average processing time in 2018 was 4 minutes, 34 seconds, 2 minutes, 49 seconds. Average hold time for abandoned calls, 46 seconds. And I went through all of those abandoned, and Randy is correct, 13 seconds, 12 seconds, 10 seconds. It's the longer calls that bring the average up, because you may have, I think the longest wait time that we have, of the max is what we call it, is about 3 minutes. So we have been focusing on that. I can tell you the supervisors have been looking at the dashboard. We did have a system prior to the dashboard called Black Box. It gave us all this information, but the system we have now is an upgrade and much better. So what are some of the goals that we're looking at for next year is that we want to reduce this even further. I've been looking at the statistics, and if we continue online with what we're currently doing, by September 2019, we should have a 47% decrease in abandoned calls. So you're going to see going from 38,000 probably to around 15. November and September, let's see, October and September, excuse me, of last year, which is was part of some of the stats that we got because October is the beginning of the fiscal year. That's when we did not have the 5 positions filled and the 2 additional positions. So if you would refer back to some of the stats that Steve been sending to you guys, you'll see that around December, the abandons went down to 626 calls. Now, if you go back to September, they were almost 6,000. October, I want to say November was about 4,000. And as Randy said, 600, 300, 300. So it's starting to be continuous. It keep it up. We're where we want to be. So what we want to focus on for next year is developing a progression plan, because we want these employees to have something that they can look forward to and not say that this is a dead-end job. Progression plan in most call centers, the rep comes in as a 1, they move up to a 2, to a 3, then so forth, so on. And that's what we're working and hoping to have in place at least by July of this year. We want to reduce that abandon even farther, and we want to get it at least, I had it 3%, but let me back up. I had it 3% for this year, but I'm happy to report that we're at 1.9%. We want also to implement an incentive program, and we added it in the budget, last year budget. We used what was left, and this incentive program is to keep those good, hard-working employees, to give them the opportunity to make extra money so that when Navy Federal or any other company try to pull them and say, hey, look, and jangling $1 or $2, we can say you can make extra money by your performance. So this incentive program, you'll see $80,000 in my budget. That incentive program is for that, and that's for about 37 employees. And again, it's all going to be performance-based. They may make the $1, and then they may make 50 cents. So it could be 50 cent or a dollar. It depends on the performance. This is a way that when customers call, we're going to look at their customer service skills, their soft skills. How are you processing, handling, and communicating and articulating ECUA's vision and message and goals to the customer? So that's some of the things that we're looking at. We have a continuous education program working with our HR department where our employees will go online with this progression plan, and they will take 20-minute courses. And we have set up a block of classes for the employees from working in a stressful environment, irate customers, so forth, so on, everything that deals with customer service to keep that continuous education going. Most people don't realize we just don't answer phones. Customer service, we have the phone section, we have the walk-in section, we have an area that is our research department that handles delinquent notice, bankruptcies, S-status return checks, liens. So it's quite extensive of what do we do. It's just not answering phone. You basically really need to know good basic math because you're constantly using math. Even though we have Excel, some customers, they want you to get on a calculator and say, give me the receipt. So those are some of the things that we're looking at. We're also wanting to lower the average speed of answer even lower. Remember I said we were at 2 minutes at one point. The 18 seconds is where the market is at 20. So if we stay around at 18 seconds and don't go above that 20 seconds, our former contract vendor, Pat Live, called me because they told me they answer their calls at 20 seconds. They have the staff. I got a call from their rep, Stephanie, the other day saying, what happened? We don't have any Pat Lives from you guys. That's because with the revamping of our system, our employees are able to answer these calls right now. Do you guys have any questions?
Ms. Benson?
First of all, this is pretty impressive, where you've come from and where you are now. Yeah, got my attention, and that's great. How do we now, we've created this efficiency, how do we create a need for people to go to the website instead of making the call in the first place? Do we have a plan to do that?
What we are doing, especially for the ERP, we're making sure that we're getting email addresses, and we always convey to customer that you can pay your bill online, you can seek information from ECUA website, but as the system is upgraded, there will be more information or things that they can tap into on the website. Some things that we don't have right now, but that is coming.
So you will work with Mr.
Yes.
Don on that, because really you want to kind of work yourself into obsolescence and have it all done online.
Exactly.
Because then you don't have the personnel costs. Well, I also just want to say, I can't imagine doing that job, and I'm glad you're creating incentives for these people. My first job out of college was at a call center. I don't ever want to do that again. Rude people.
Exactly, yes.
There was another young woman who was just out of college at the same time, and I won't be long on this, but it was so awful. We finally figured out how to reach each other's telephone, so we would call each other during the day when we couldn't stand it anymore, and so we looked like we were busy when this boss hovered over us.
Oh, that's funny.
I'm gonna have to write that one down.
But I sometimes get people who call in and they're so angry, and I don't get the brunt of what your customer service people do. So what the job they do is often thankless. So thank you for finding ways to reward them for good service.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ponson?
How do y'all define an abandoned call?
An abandoned call is a call that comes into the ACD, it goes in a queue, and it can be in queue for 5 seconds. They hang up, that's an abandoned call.
The robocalls, are gonna mess that up. You might wanna look at changing that to, if it's a 10-second, a 15-second, and that'll fix that bottom end and give you a real good number of what your staff is doing. Because actually, if a homeowner hangs up after 15 seconds, that shouldn't be y'all's fault.
Right. Now, we do get a lot of customers hang up during that time thinking, I'll call back and get in the
Yeah.
queue. And then some of our board members may get a call from them saying, I've been in queue for all this long. I put the calls in 11 seconds, 15 seconds, 14 seconds.
Yeah. But that's their fault. That's not
Yeah.
your fault, so.
And they don't realize we do have the option that they can select a callback. So you won't lose your place in line. If you push a callback and you don't have time to wait, you put in that number, we'll call you right back automatically.
The other day I called to report, I'd been driving past for about 2 weeks, a leak in the road on the way to my office, and I finally said, I need to call, and they did a great job. I was not on the phone for, 3 or 4 minutes. They looked up, they looked on the internet, they saw the picture, and then within a day it was fixed. So
Awesome.
They did a great job.
That's great to hear.
And I didn't even tell them who I was. So, they're general public.
Thank you. Mr. Perkins?
Yeah, I'm very encouraged. I mean, I remember right around election time was when we were really, really short-staffed. All these FMLA people were out, and the calls were people were 2 minutes on hold, and I'm like, what in the heck is going on in customer service? I was just starting to get really kind of fed up with it, and I'm real impressed now because I have called. I had a guy call, and he says I can't get through to ECUA. I've called him 4 or 5 times and can never get through, and da-da-da. And so every time I'd do that, I'd call and get through right away. I mean, wouldn't even be on hold. And what it was is he was calling, and if he didn't have a live person answer the phone, he just hung up, And so, you can't call the comic book store nowadays without being on hold for 10 minutes.
Exactly.
So it is nice to have this down to 20 seconds, and I'm pleased with that and comfortable with that. I tried calling SunPass. I've tried calling SunPass, Florida SunPass. They've said we've just shut the phones down. Don't even try to call. I mean, they actually say that on there. I mean, that's that's bad. That's a bad situation. I don't know what's going on with them, but I'm impressed. I'm impressed with the improvement that we've made. I hope we can sustain it, and I imagine that as we integrate the technology upgrades, that it will get even better. But I'd like to kind of keep it. It's real aggravating for people to be on. What is aggravating is to be on hold for 20 minutes somewhere, have somebody pick up the phone and say, oh, well, that's not this department, we're going to transfer you, and they put them on hold for another 20 minutes somewhere else. So as long as we're getting them a live person in 20 seconds or so and getting the problem taken care of, it's encouraging.
Thank you. Mr. Kimball?
So with the progression path for your people, I'm assuming that obviously with those different levels comes different pay increases that are of a permanent nature that
Yes.
goes with that. So with the incentive, is that structured as a one-time incentive, or is that also permanent pay rate
The
increases?
incentive program is set up that, similar to our sanitation incentive program, they will be paid out quarterly. That's what the employees accepted to be paid out quarterly. But they will only receive that if the performance is up here.
Sure.
We're not rewarding mediocrity.
And now, my other question with that, is it each person, it's an individual award for each person, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, is it capped? So like I did the math real quick at 37, that's about a little over $2,000 per person a piece that.
Yes.
So is it capped where one person can only make that much per year?
Exactly.
Okay.
The most that person can make would be $1 per hour.
Okay.
Every quarter it's about $500 extra. If they make the 5, your performance level have to be at a 5 on a scale of 1 to 5. 50 cents for a 4, for a 3, there's nothing.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Thank you.
Did you take your question down?
Okay.
You got another one?
I was
Go
just
ahead.
going to, on that, I think that's a great structured program. I mean, especially as you mentioned, competing with Navy Federal, to have something like that where you've got an incentive plan that dangles the carrot in front of someone to continue to do a great job. That's a great structure. I like that.
Thank you.
Dr. Walker?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I'd like to ask, how is the retention rate among the employees doing these days?
Right now, if we continue with the employees that we hired, normally by this time, we will, 2 employees would have left already. But we have all 7 that we hired in that block. And it seems like we're going to have a good group. They are taking numbers. Some of them have become some of our top callers throughout the week that we have been noticing. Most of them have experience. We don't have a lot of them that we hired with that 20-year experience, because my experience with that, you already burnt out. You've been in these call centers, and you think you're going from a bad call center to a better, and we have most people that come in and say, I never seen a call center like ECUA. And I'm just being honest with you all, if I can be very candid. I get that with a lot of, even the new ones that we have right now have conveyed that to us. It's a tough area to work in.
Thank you. Any further questions? Gabe, I commend you. This has been spectacular what's happened over the last 90 days even. I agree with Dale. It got pretty bad there for a little while, and we were, the board takes the heat when that happens because we get the phone calls. I will say that I've gotten real good at when somebody calls and they say, I called your call center and so was so nasty to me. And I say, well, wait a minute, let me pull that phone call and I can listen to it, and I'm going to listen to it. And I said that on the way here, and all of a sudden it changes to, well, they weren't really that bad, But I commend you, and I commend your supervisors there. Thank you very much. I know it's been a long, hard road, but appreciate you and John over there for making this so much better, and all of your supervisors. Thank you very much for sticking in there with us.
Y'all stand. It's really not me, it's all of them. They doing the work and the employees. They making me look good. Thank you.
Mr. Perkins.
This is more of a policy issue than a budget issue, but it's something I hope we'll look at and be thinking about, is that a lot of these big corporations or utilities or something, whenever you call them, this call is recorded and may be used against you, basically, I think we should have a policy, and I think that the insurance companies, the cable companies, the electric companies, all of them should have a policy that if a person is recorded, then they will have access to that recording if they want it. So I don't know how difficult that will be. That might be something that we can think about, but I would like, if a person records, if a customer's recorded and they, consent to the recording and they talk with people, I wouldn't like to see just us do it, but, it's a start, that they would have access to that. When I, call the cable company and they promise me all this stuff, and then I get it in the bill and I don't have all the stuff that the rep promised me, well, they've got the recording, but I don't. So I would like for us to set an example by allowing customers to have access to their recordings when they're recorded. So technologically, it may be a little complex, but if we could just start thinking about that, policy-wise in the future, it might be something that would benefit our ratepayers.
I agree. I think we have access to it. They could have access to it. So, I would like to see that information about the callback, that people know that they can call back. Maybe we could do a video for our social media page that explains that. That the people can call back. Push the button to call back, and they'll get called back in the immediate order that they were there. I think that's very impressive. I would always push the call back because I don't like to sit around and wait. So, thank you very much. Appreciate everyone at staff doing this and everybody hanging in here for this. We move now to item L, which is the fiscal year 2020 capital improvement program budget, and I'm going to ask that Mr. Perkins allow his guests to.
I'll just give a brief deal on. I've met with the people. I've been on the board quite a while now, and for over 20 years, I've supported the sewer expansion program, where we've taken people off septic tanks and put them on sewer. Rarely, if ever, I think there are a couple little situations, but rarely, if ever, has any of that work gone on in my district. And so I'm not, being patriarchal here, but I've always supported it and always done it based on our criteria, which is, affects area surface waters, affects public health and safety, or affects our water wells, our wellheads. Well, this is called River Gardens. The reason it's called River Gardens is because there's a river right there, and there's a creek that runs through it, and those seeping septic tanks impact that river. So I just wanted them to know that I'm going to be advocating this year for us to try and get this further up the list and get it over the line. It's been a number of years now I've been talking with them about it, and we haven't been able to get anything done. So I'm just hoping there'll be some support among the committee and among the board for taking care of River Gardens this year. I don't know if you guys want to say anything about it, about the problems you've experienced or anything, but just, okay, all right, thanks. We appreciate that. That'll probably go a long way for you, actually.
Thank you, Dale. I agree. It's Dale and myself and Dr. Walker. We rarely see a lot of sewer expansion. All the sewer expansion's going on in Miss Benson's, but and McCorvey's districts because they're closest to the waterways. But I do believe that that's probably going to change in the future. And I look forward to seeing your. I look forward to seeing
It can't
River.
change too much or we won't get their votes.
Oh, I know. I look forward to seeing River Gardens in there this year. I have to take Nature Trail off because they don't have agreement, so I'll push towards yours.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Does anybody have any further? I actually asked this morning if we could move sewer expansion up to the point that it's going to be covered this year. So.
Yeah. And the thing is that we've got a bunch of projects in here, and I'm glad that we're getting the budget early and everybody can look over these projects and make decisions. And there's a lot of important projects. I mean, it's going to be a tough year. It's going to take a lot of money to get these done. But there are a lot of good projects in here. The one thing I'm hoping, this GAC filter replacement, we got out ahead of the EPA on these PFAs and PFOs contamination, and even though there were no mandates or anything and we were below health advisory levels, we still put these granular activated carbon filters on these wells. We're replacing those filters every year. We're looking at $1 million. Initially setting it up was way more than that, and we're trying to recover that money on behalf of our ratepayers. So you may hear people say, oh, ECUA has bad water, they're suing so and so over the water. Well, we're suing them because we're making sure it's good, and we shouldn't have our ratepayers, have to cover the cost of something that was contaminated by somebody else. So those levels, when they leave those wells, are zero. They're non-detectable. So we're doing, in abundance of caution, we're doing that. But I'm hoping that $1 million right there we can recover. And litigation takes forever. I mean, it may not be this year. It may not be 4 or 5 years. But I'm hoping we'll have some success on that.
Thank you. Mr. Kimball.
May I ask, I know typically we have a line we can draw somewhere where we know that, we don't have I know that we're not to the revenue side, so we don't, but do we have an idea of where the line is going to be to keep consistent with our traditional increases that would come along with that, Mass?
Mr. Sorrell, I asked that same question this morning.
And that's a really tough question, and a lot of it depends upon the board and their willingness to raise the rates. Basically, that's the determining factor. But if we go with just something very normal based on the consumer price index and not issuing any additional debt or very little additional debt, you're looking at 25 million.
So down to number 78. Dr. Walker.
Well, that's not where I was hoping that line would appear. I want to say that I see some good things in here that I appreciate. On page 61, the EPA resiliency study, and on page 104, the elevation adjustment for flood-prone lift stations. Those two items, along with some of the information provided by Mr. Dane in his presentation today, show that ECUA is paying attention to the effects of climate change and weather change in positive ways.
What was the second one you said?
Page 104. The title pretty much tells you what it is. Okay. So I appreciate seeing those things and knowing that ECUA is not just pretending that change is not going to occur in the future. It is, and we're close to the water, so, and major disasters are going to occur with greater frequency than ever, so I'm glad to see us paying some attention to those needs. I wanted to ask about a couple of items. On page 81, transmission main repairs. And the statement on page 81 is that major trunk line from, all the way from downtown to the central plant is compromised, already, I'll say, already compromised. I'm surprised at that, and compromised by corrosion. And I would ask if Mr. Sorrell has any explanation or clarification or whatever. Mr. Sorrell?
Yes, sir. That's a ductile iron pipe that has a particular lining in it that is to protect it against the corrosion. We have found in past instances where some of that lining is not adhering to the way it's supposed to. Moreover, some of it may have cracks, and all it takes is a crack or a pinhole and it starts the corrosion. We're in the process right now of analyzing 6 points. I just talked to Stacy this morning. We're analyzing 6 points right now. We can use a magnetic process at some of the air release valves where we can determine pipe thickness. It's very complicated, but we can determine that. And from that, we'll be able to start narrowing down if we have a major problem, and if so, where at. It will be a major event if we have to replace any of that pipe, because that has constant flow, and it's very large ductile iron pipe. Most people don't really understand that, but a 20-foot section of that pipe, just of average size, weighs 8,000 pounds. So that'll give you just some idea, it's huge. So we're looking at it now. I'll know more as time goes on. We're getting ready to have a very specialized company come in and do some of the magnetic testing at 6 locations that we're going to start with, and try to narrow it down from there, and we'll know more as time goes on. We also have an issue, and if you look closely, where the water line going to Pensacola Beach, the 24-inch water line that's under the bay, it's high-density polyethylene. We've seen a report where potentially the internal liner on that may be degrading. If that's so, we got to replace that. That's going to be millions. So we've just got a lot of things going on right now. We're just trying to determine all this through scientific testing, and it's an expensive business. It just is, and you know, I know there's a lot of other projects you want to have done, but we may not have any choice but to do some of these projects, and we'll have more information as time goes on.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. Walker.
If anyone else wishes to comment on this item, I'll yield the floor.
Go ahead. I think we have one person behind you.
I have, I can move on to the next item, or I can yield.
No, go ahead.
Okay. On page 82, valve location and maintenance. We've been trying to locate valves for 25 years, I know. Are we still locating valves, or are we basically through with that task?
We have accomplished a huge amount of that. I think we have, if I remember correctly, in excess of 18,000 valves. Many of those are old, very old. Some of those did not come as being identified on the plans that were given to us by the city, the county, and private sector. So some of those, we don't even know where they exist, and we find them as we go through and we find problems with the system. We have identified most of them, but I have to tell you that there are some that we don't know where they're at, and there's some that we find on a daily basis, and we have to repair them.
Please continue.
And thank you. And on page 90, Central Water Reclamation Facility Effluent Disposal Capacity Study seems to be about other things than extending a line to UWF, but I want to ask, is extending a line to UWF for reclaimed water a dead issue now?
No, sir. It's somewhat on hold. We have been unable to get an easement across Gulf Power Plant Chris property in order to extend that line. When this whole thing was built, they had promised us that we could get an easement across that property where Plant Chris is located, so we could extend that line down to Scenic Hills Golf Course and the University of West Florida. That easement has never been provided to this point, and that's created us some concern. I've got an issue going on right now, which I'll be communicating with the board, where they want an easement across our property. So it may be a difficult situation, but I'll communicate with the board as we go a little further along.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you.
I was just going to ask on page 82 about the 18-mile pipeline that where some of it's been corroded. Have we already researched a different type of pipe that has a lower corrosion rate that we're going to use going forward?
Mr. Sorrell?
Yes and no. It gets real complicated. It's not necessarily the pipe, it's the coating in the pipe. And we have done a lot of research. We have some old pipe in the storage yard, and we are using a different type of coating now on those pipes. This was the best that was available at the time. The reason why we used ductile iron was the resistance or resiliency that it has. If we would have used a polyvinyl chloride, a PVC pipe, and say a contractor of some sort came along and hit that pipe, he'd fracture it. And then some of that's under pressure, 90 PSI. Essentially what that means, you'd have had a geyser of waste material. And it would have been difficult, very difficult to fix. So we decided to go with ductile iron because it's very rigid and you just about can't break it. And that was the right decision at the time. We also looked at high-density polyethylene. But at the time, it really wasn't available for what we needed in that size pipe. You know, technology's changed a lot in the last 5 or 10 years, and we're starting to use a lot of the HDPE and some other things, and we're also using a different liner inside the ductile iron. So we're moving along with technology as it comes available, and the answer is yes, we're looking at it, but we're still using ductile iron where necessary.
Mr. Ponson?
This easement you're talking about at Gulf Power, now that we got a new company, is there any, have y'all had any, is this too new to be in discussions with the new group, or?
It's not too new, but I can't tell you that we've made any headway yet.
Okay.
There's a lot of things going to happen here in the next few weeks, and we'll just see.
There's a lot of people changing there, too.
Well, there's a lot of people, and it's near their ash pile, and that creates environmental concerns, and I'm sure that's the major issue, but if they would just communicate with us, I think we could probably resolve a lot of that. We offered to double and triple line the pipe and various other things. We didn't get anywhere. Yeah. But now there's an issue where they want to come through our property, and we'll see.
Thank you. Mr. Kimball?
So talking about them, I know with the new entity, they're more solar focused as opposed to what's going on out there. I mean, I know that they take a lot of the reclaimed water now. Do we foresee any issue with them not taking as much of that water in the future?
Great question. Mr. Sorrell?
They are converting Plant Crest over to a natural gas facility. Okay, that's why they're wanting to run a major gas line down there. And it's because of the environmental controls associated with coal. And your question was, do we see potential diminishment of the amount of effluent that they take? Yes, very definitely. And we're taking some other issues. I just signed an order today for some specialized pumps, so just in case that happens, that we'll be able to send that effluent some other places. So, yeah, we're ahead of it. We know what's going on. It's just another costly proposition.
Dr. Walker?
On page 79, and this is below the 25 million line that you mentioned. Pensacola Bay water main replacement. That is essentially a utility relocation project, right? And we will have if we have to do it, we will have to do it, right?
It's not a utility relocation, it's replacement of the existing water line if we find the HDPE pipelining is degraded. But we're doing the evaluations of that now. We've already cut coupons and we've looked at some things. But I believe this is the one that we're putting it in line in case we have to do it. Okay. But it is a big deal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kimball.
So, back to the line question. We got priority 1.1 for a lot of stuff down to 88. I mean, what ballpark to just accomplish through the 1.1 priority? What kind of a rate increase would we have to look at, or combination of debt issuance to make something like that happen? And I know that roughly, I know we're still early in the processes.
Yeah, and that's a tough one for me, because if we go around the CPI, we're probably looking at the $20 million range, maybe a little more. Just depends on how much carryover we have. We're trying to watch the budget, because what happens with this year, if we watch the budget, we have carryover money, we use that next year for capital, so it reduces the amount of money we have to have. So each 1% of increase on the water and wastewater brings in about $900,000. So that'll give you some idea. So we're at 25 million, that's at 40 million, so you can take the differential there. And it's a big number. But don't take that as gospel at this point. But it's, you're probably looking in the 8 to 10% range.
Additionally, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Perkins.
I mean, the good part about getting all this early is we can think about it and make decisions and plan for it. The bad part is it's less accurate the further out you are. And so,
Right.
Just places like Southtown and some of those big developments are going to bring in a lot more revenue, and that may increase our bonding capability. I mean, maybe we have to do some bonding to knock out a bunch of these, but that's repeatable revenue that's not going anywhere. It's going to be there year after year. So it's just stuff that they'll have to pull together as we get closer to figure out where we're going to draw the line.
Thank you. Great. Sorry to keep everybody so long today. We move now to the informational reports. Does anybody have any questions? If not, we move on to unfinished business. And none new business. Dr. Walker, sewer charges.
Sewer charges. Yes. We were looking earlier today at approving a force main through some property from a new subdivision, Iron Lake subdivision, or Iron, whatever it was. And this was going to be a project that depended on ECUA for sewer, but its water was going to come from the Farm Hill water system. So we will be getting revenue only from it, only for sewer, not for water. It's my understanding, or it has been my understanding in years past, I haven't asked in a long time or discussed it in a long time, that we always actually lost a little money on the sewer system operation because it's expensive, the rates are high, everybody complains that my sewer rate is 3 times as high as my water rate, my water bill, and how can that be? And people don't understand that it's simply more expensive to clean up their water than to provide original water. It seems to me that if we are sort of losing money on sewer, and if we're sort of making that up on water, then if we have somebody who's a sewer customer only, we should charge them some kind of surcharge, a higher rate than what we charge to people who are water and sewer both. I'd like to suggest that we consider that.
Ms. Ritz.
Thank you. When I heard you say that, would that include current customers who have just water? Are you referring to, which group are you referring to?
I am referring to customers who have sewer only from ECUA.
So like the people in People's Water area? Yeah. I don't think you're talking to us. Ms. Benson.
Yeah, I miss Mr. Odom. He would probably tell us that we can't charge one group of customers a different rate than another group of customers, and I think this would fall into that. You know, I think about the people we are adding over in the Warrington area who are People's Water customers who are actually paying more for water than our customers are. And if we then said we're going to penalize you because you're not our water customers, I think that could be a problem. I understand mathematically what you're talking about, but I think we would be opening up a PR nightmare if we did that. I would probably be voting no.
Can I just ask one question of you? Are you getting complaints in that area of water bills spiking?
From time to time, I haven't had any recently.
I had one this morning, so I wondered if it was.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of goes in clusters.
Mr. Ponson?
I understand the logic, Dr. Walker, but on the other side, I just bought a building on Barrancas that has a septic tank because there's no sewer available, so I shouldn't pay as much for my water since somebody's making more off of it. So the other side of that, you gotta go both ways, but I don't think that, I mean, maybe some kind of a charge on new development might be possible, but individual customers would be tough.
If nothing more on that matter, then we move to our second open forum. Is there anyone that would like to address the CAC? If not, I thank everyone for their patience. I thank staff for the hard work, and we are adjourned.